Hello and welcome to Money Matters TV. We have an exceptionally good show in store for you today. I am Patricia Dunn of Merrill Lynch, a wealth management advisor, and my co-host today is Paul Mitchell, a commercial banker with Mitchell Capital Corp. Good to see you again.
Pleasure, Pat.
And our special guest today is David Discenza of Discenza Business Continuity, a business that specializes in avoiding unexpected business interruptions. But let's start first with where we are in the market today. Interesting timing, and as you know, this show is taped, so what our comments today may not be appropriate at the time that you're hearing them. But we're at the end of 2017. We have had a remarkable year for the market. The Dow, as of the end of November, was up over 22%. The S&P was up over 18%. We don't get too many years with numbers like this. And the Fed has just raised the rate for the third time this year. So all eyes are on what is going to happen in 2018. Well, from my 40-year experience, I can tell you, you do not follow a 22% up year with a second up 22% year. But things still look very, very positive for equities. We still have the driving forces of the bull market, and they are good economic growth, low inflation, easy monetary policy. So the things are still in place to keep the market going. What could present a problem, which I'm glad that Paul is with me today, he can discuss it in greater detail, are these rising interest rates, because this will have an impact on the market at some point. We're actually more concerned about bonds than we are about stocks. We've reached the point after 3 interest rate rises where income investors, for every $2 to $3 they're taking in income, are now giving back $1 in principal. Because as interest rates rise, bond prices fall. And as this trend continues, at some point we will see an exodus from the bond market. And exoduses are not always pretty. But Paul, if you could help us out here.
Sure.
So much of our economic growth comes from small businesses, and it's important that we keep our small businesses healthy. In this current rising interest rate environment, how good is the access to capital for small business owners?
Well, it's kind of a mixed bag. I mean, if small businesses want to borrow money from banks, I can assure you, banks are doing all they possibly can to lend money to small businesses as well as other sized businesses to increase their loan portfolios so they can make more money and grow. However, a lot of small businesses still are not happy with the availability of credit because banks are, to a certain degree, a little bit stingy still, reeling in from the great crisis of a few years ago. Additionally, some small businesses don't have that degree of confidence that if they borrow money today, even at these great low interest rates, that they're going to be able to, assuredly have the growth and increased profitability to pay back the loans in a timely manner. So it's still kind of a mixed bag. I mean, there's besides the banks, there are other new credit sources out there that didn't exist.
That's true. 10,
20 years ago. Alternative, lending sources, whether it's very small business loans or personal loans of up to $100,000. They don't really ask many questions. You say, do you have some kind of $15,000 a month of income or whatever, and maybe you pledge your accounts receivable or something like that. To larger loans that require a little more information, but still these are entities that are not regulated by the government, so they're not subject to some of the constraints that traditional banks are.
Let's follow up on that question because you're absolutely correct. And I'm wondering, with these rising interest rates and these alternative sources of capital for businesses, what kind of impact are we seeing on bank profitability?
Well, the bank's profitability in the last few years has not been, I guess, great. It's been kind of okay. Let me tell you a little bit how the interest rate environment for banks works. Let's say a bank has $100 million in capital. Okay, now typically with that kind of capital, they can have assets up to about 10 times that. That is, assets is in terms of loans and other types of investments, most of which comes from liabilities from deposits. People put money in the bank, but the money really belongs to the individual, right? Or the people that invested, whether it's a business or an individual, that type of thing. Okay, so you have $100 million of capital. Now, the banks aren't paying interest on that capital. That's the initial investment that started the bank going, plus its profits over the years. So, if $100 million of capital, and if it's making loans at 3%, it makes 3% of $100 million, $3 million a year. Okay, because it's not paying any interest on that. If interest rates go up 1 percentage point, now it's making $4 million a year.
Correct.
On the same $100 million in capital. That's a 30% increase in that capital. So it's making more money. Now, we talked about the $100 million of capital, but I said a bank could have maybe $1 billion of assets based upon that $100 million of capital. So the rest comes from deposits. Well, most deposits have a cost.
Yes.
The bank's paying an interest rate.
Interest rate.
Okay. So the bank, therefore, is working on a spread. If it's paying, let's say, 2% on a savings account, it's going to lend out at maybe 4.5%, 2.5% more. So if interest rates go up and it's paying 3% on the savings, it's still going to be getting maybe another 2.5% income on that money.
Okay.
So the spread remains pretty constant, regardless of what the interest rates are. But the return on that initial capital, that capital base, is variable depending upon how interest rates go. Now, like most things, moderation is good. If interest rates went up to 12, 13, 14% like they did in our lifetime.
In our lifetime, yes. Our careers.
I mean, that's not a good thing. That's
All
bad.
right.
People are panicking. It's very hard to repay that kind of money on that kind of interest rate. So, and the other thing is with interest rates still, I mean, they're very, very low. So they went up 1/4 point. So now we're up to, I don't know, was it 1.5 or 1 3/4% is the prime rate. A good business loan might generate for bank another point or two above that. 4% for a business loan in my career, the last 30 years, that's unheard of still. So interest rates still are very, very low. So if they go up to 6, 7, 8%, something like that, which is not going to happen, I don't think, in the next 12 or 24 months, possible,
No,
but
I don't
unlikely.
either. No.
That could be a little bit, nerve-wracking. But if it's another point or two, that type of thing, so we're talking about 2 or 3%, another 2.5% spread for the banks on top of that, 5%, 6%. Historically, that's still good, attractive.
So basically, rising interest rates, as long as it's slow and steady, is good for the banks
Right, and it doesn't go too far up.
and doesn't go too far up, but isn't necessarily good for bond investors because they see their principal decline.
There you go.
And of course, this show is about money matters. So let's take a viewer question which speaks to that directly.
Sure.
We have Jack Nance from Philadelphia asked, how do you see interest rates moving in the near future? I think what Jack means is how many rate hikes do you think
Yeah.
we're going to see in
Sure,
2018?
Yeah. Well, with the caveat, of course, that I don't have a crystal ball, and not too many people I know do. Still, moderately. I mean, we haven't seen much of a spike in inflation, for example, either, which would tend to drive up interest rates.
That's right.
The Fed has been monitoring the growth of the economy very, very closely. There aren't any great signs that the economy is growing significantly. I mean, it's growing nicely, type of thing. So generally speaking, we would expect that interest rates would continue to go up. Let's say if it went up 1/4 point each of the next 4 quarters, that wouldn't necessarily be bad. it would be certainly pretty steady type of thing. But if you look 12 months from now and interest rates are 1% higher than they are today, again, still historically low. So count on them going up. I mean, they've been down for an awful long time, historically low. So,
Well, again, that would feed well for your equity buyers because, as you say, businesses will be able to continue to thrive and hopefully reinvest and hopefully employ more people, and
sure.
so the economy gets stronger and stronger. Well, if you have questions and you would like to submit them, here is where you would submit them to Money Matters and future hosts and co-hosts.
You can have your questions answered on Money Matters. Please go to our website, money-matterstv.com. On our homepage, click on the banner on the right that says, Send us your questions. While you're on our website, you can find information about our hosts and guests, as well as show notes and links about this show and past shows.
I'll take it.
Money Matters is also available as a podcast on iTunes and Stitcher, so you can listen to Money Matters while you're on the go. That website address, again, is money, M-O-N-E-Y, -matters, M-A-T-T-E-R-S, TV.com.
Welcome back. We're now going to be speaking with David Discenza of Discenza Continuity Businesses. And welcome. Glad you
Hi,
could
Pat.
come.
Thank you very much for having me.
Your topic and your company is absolutely fascinating. I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Sure.
Can you help our viewers with what exactly is business continuity planning?
Sure. There is some confusion around that in the minds of people. It is the practice of identifying the assets that a company has that they are at risk for losing. For example, their actual place of business is an asset. Their people are an asset. If they're a manufacturer, their supply chain's an asset, their distribution chain is an asset, their data's an asset, their intellectual property is an asset, their brand and their reputation is an asset. What I do is help them identify all of these and then help them construct a strategy and tactics that they can put in place when something happens that causes them to lose one or many of them, so that they get back to business as usual as quickly as possible.
Interesting. I'm thinking of a nonprofit I'm involved with that has recently embarked upon a risk management policy, whatever you want to call it. So it's kind of dealing with that kind of a concept.
Who's that?
Well, it's called Valley Forge Educational Systems
okay,
in Melbourne.
sure.
They have a school and organization primarily for autistic children and other disabled young adults and all. And sure, if they had a fire or some kind of lawsuit that jeopardized their name or something like that, that's one of the aspects of a risk management kind of policy thing. So how would your business kind of dovetail with that?
Exactly. Risk management's a very broad area. I deal with what's called residual risk. It's what's left over when you can't mitigate it, you can't shift the risk to somebody like an insurance company. There's that little bit left, and that's what I deal with.
Could you give us an example of a situation that occurred in the last,
sure.
6, 7, 5 years?
Sure. I got into this business when I was at American Express. My vice president voluntold me that I was going to take over the business continuity plan for the risk management organization at American Express. We lost our building to Superstorm Sandy for 2 months. How do you run a global business without its world headquarters? Well, American Express is a financial services institution. It's regulated and required to have a plan. All the business units had to have a plan. We had one. We activated it the Friday before Sandy. Sandy hit on a Monday. We sent everybody home with their laptops and told them, don't expect to come into work for the foreseeable future. Work from home if you can. We redistributed work globally to our different offices in the UK and India, other parts of the United States. We continued to operate as if nothing had happened to us.
Wow, impressive.
Well, when you hear the term risk management, so many people associate those two words with insurance.
Right.
And clearly what you just did for American Express was not insurance. But does insurance play into this at all?
It does, in that most insurance carriers look very favorably on the companies that have invested in creating a business continuity plan. They will see that in a reduction of their premiums. Companies like the Travelers are very big in promoting business continuity for their clients.
Good
So,
to
yeah.
know for small businesses, small and medium-sized businesses.
It's not an insurance product. I often
No.
get that question. Is this insurance?
Yeah.
No. You could think of it as a form of insurance because it's there to help you get back to normal operations quickly.
Just to play devil's advocate,
Sure.
let's say I or a company or this nonprofit, I guess, engaged you to do this plan, whatever. What kind of assurance would it have or feel or be recognized from other outside sources that this was a good plan, it was well done? Is there somebody else coming in involved? Is there a regulator come in and take a look at the plan and say, and certifies that, yes, this is a good plan, or?
In
How does
some
that work?
cases, yes. I don't know about the school that you're referring to, if it's if there's an accrediting agency, there may be, and they may refer to a standard that exists out there. There are two primary standards. There's an ISO standard, ISO 22301, for business continuity planning, and there's one also from the National Fire Protection Association, their standard 1600,
Okay.
which lists what a good business continuity plan should have in it. So I use an amalgam of the two
Okay.
in designing plans.
Now, when you're sitting down with the principals of the company and you're talking about continuity planning, I imagine this starts out at like the conference room table. Like, what would we do if?
Yes.
Can you talk about this tabletop discussion and what it involves?
Well, the first step in doing all of this is to ascertain what parts of a plan they may already have in place. For example, they may have an emergency response plan, what to do in case of fire or some other kind of emergency. Most companies do have something like that. Most companies haven't thought about, well, if we lost this building, where would we meet? If this conference room table weren't available to us, where would we go?
Where would we have Money Matters TV?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Well, yeah, exactly. If Philly Cam lost this building,
Yeah.
where would they reopen? How would they continue to operate their business? So, we start at a very high level with those people around the table and find out what thought they have already put into this. I do a kind of an audit of the company just to see where they are and what we're going to need to do. Most of them, for example, they've never listed all of their critical processes, and I'm willing to bet they've never mapped their critical processes. People just know how stuff gets done. Well, if you don't map it and you lose critical people, the ones with the deep knowledge, now what are you going to do? So it's very vital that you map those critical processes, and from that you can build your workarounds. Okay, we've lost our building, we don't have our computers anymore. How are we going to do this?
Sure. Now, you're one person. Your name is Discenza Business Continuity Solutions. Do you have other people that get involved in this process?
Yes. I do rely on other people. For example, business continuity planning is often called disaster recovery. Well, they're really not the same thing. Disaster recovery deals with IT data and things like that, recovering your
The cloud and offsite
and all of that.
storage
Now,
and
I have good knowledge of that. There are people out there with much deeper knowledge that I can bring in.
Okay.
I bring in someone to help develop a crisis communications plan for a company. You know, if something bad happens, you need to communicate not only internally, but externally. And you can be sure that the press is going to get involved. And so you need to know how to deal with the press. So I bring in other experts as I need for a plan.
Well, say a medium-sized company approaches you and they say, we realize the importance of this because if we had a fire and lost our building, we'd essentially lose our business and therefore nobody would get paid. How long does it take to develop a plan, and what kind of guidelines can you give us regarding cost? I'm sure it varies all over.
It does. The short answer to that is it depends.
It depends.
It depends. It depends upon how complex the business is, whether it's one site or multi-sites. Is it manufacturing? Is it a software development firm? All of those figure into the cost. As for time, the client really is in the driver's seat on that. This is an intensive process. There's a lot of information that needs to be gathered together and refined. And you know, people are busy doing their jobs, and they're being asked to do this on top of it. So they really drive the project from the standpoint of length. Now, the longer I'm involved, the costlier it is for them. So it's to their benefit that they move quickly. But I can't give somebody a company of 50 million a year and 200 employees. It's going to cost X.
Right. Right. There's no cookie cutter
There's
here.
no cookie cutter. Everyone is, think of it as a custom tailored suit. You know, they all have arms, they all have pockets, but they're, you know, different sizes, different styles. So
David, if somebody Googled continuity planning, what would they come up with? All kinds of other competitors or other kinds of companies or outfits or consultants? Or
yes.
How would they know what they should be looking for?
What should they be looking for in a firm? Well, they'd certainly want to see somebody who's established. Most of my competitors are really software vendors. They market a business continuity management system, and they add consulting practice on top of that. I do not do that. I'm not a software vendor. If a company is of a size where it would be to their benefit to have a business to use a management system, then I'll help them choose the right vendor for the job. They want to see somebody who's certified. There are two certifying organizations out there. There's the Business Continuity Institute. They're pretty much they're very big in the Eurozone. Then there's the Disaster Recovery Institute International. They're global, but they're really focused here in the U.S.
Now, David, I believe you have both of those credentials, do you not?
I am certified through DRII as a certified business continuity planner.
All right.
If our viewers wanted to contact you, do you have a website, or is there a way to?
I do. They can contact me at or through my website, which is DiscenzaBCS.com, or they can Google me, or they can go on LinkedIn. There are a couple of other David Discenzas out there, but I'm the only one involved in business continuity planning.
Good, good. So how do you see the future of your industry and your business?
It's only growing. I have been in business on my own for 4 years. I've had close to 10 clients. Every one of them has been because a larger customer of theirs has said, You have to have a plan or we're not going to do business with you. And that trend is only going to continue because it's a dangerous world out there. And companies which are involved, for example, in manufacturing, they now have global supply chains. Something that happens in Indonesia is going to affect them here in the United States. They need to be certain that they have thought through how they're going to protect their supply chain. The real market, I believe, is in the middle market. The companies that are around 20 million to 300 million in revenue. A good number of them are B2B, and their larger customers, as I said, are beginning to require this of them.
Sure.
So,
Well, along those lines, is there any particular sector of the market? You mentioned manufacturing, which makes a lot of sense. How about retail? How about financial?
all sectors.
All sectors.
All sectors. If you're in business, you should have a business continuity plan. Even if you're a mom and pop store. Now, mom and pop isn't going to hire me. I would refer them to FEMA. FEMA has some very simple forms that people can use to create a plan. But if you're a larger organization, you're going to need something a little bit more robust than what FEMA can offer. But it's really across all industries. Everybody should have a plan.
All right. Thank you so much. This has been a very enlightening conversation.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Pat.
And our next guest coming up is Ira Spector, who is a PhD and a CEO of SFA Therapeutics. That's a development stage biopharmaceutical firm that is focused on the treatment of chronic inflammatory diseases, something we all are having to deal with as we age. And this particular company has a new approach to drug discovery and development. So be sure to tune in for our next guest. And as always, it's been a pleasure, and your money matters.